Hey everyone, welcome to the Super Review Show. Not for Mixed Bag tonight. Yes, it's Wednesday. Normally we do Mixed Bag on Wednesday night, but I am doing a special broadcast tonight with my good man Kyle. He is a huge Green Day fan. Hello, Kyle. How you doing tonight?
Hey, good. How you been?
Been good, been good. So what I wanted to do with Kyle for a while, for those of you who I may have mentioned him once or twice, he is a massive bleeds Green Day fan. He loves Green Day to death. Um, one of the things that I've always loved, I've always wanted to talk about him because his favorite album of all time is 21st Century Breakdown from 2009, which is obviously a Green Day album. So I wanted to just shed some light on the album and ask him a couple of questions and some stuff that's not really on YouTube yet about this album that I wanted to talk about with him because he is the Green Day guy. I know him. He's a Green Day nut. And we're going to get into it. So I'm glad to have you here. So
Glad to be here.
all right, so let's get to it. Let me start sharing my screen here. If those who are listening to us, I'm sure you may know what we're talking about, but if you're watching us live now on YouTube, we're going to be talking about 21st Century Breakdown, which is the Green Day album from 2009. Just a little before we get into our questions, Kyle, what can you tell me about this album really quick? Like what are some like initial thoughts or impressions that you get off of this album?
The initial thoughts and impressions. To me, this is the definitive Green Day album. This was the definitive. This is Green Day's sound. They started it with American Idiot. They perfected the 21st Century Breakdown. And I love all their stuff. I wish they kept on this track. I understand why they didn't. Bit of a dark period in band's history, so I get it. And I know a lot of work, like almost 4 or 5 years of work went into this album. It's all around a masterpiece. There's not a single song on it that I think is a bad song, which is very rare for me. I think every song, I think there's only one song on it, and I'll get into that later, that I could have done without, that I think was a 7 out of 10 song. But I mean, overall, I would say this is peak Green Day firing on all cylinders. Their best, not only musically best album, but best period for the band as a whole.
All right. Well, that's about sums it up for me. I mean, as far as like that initial thoughts go. So let's get into the couple questions that I've come up with for you, being the super hardcore 21st Century Breakdown guy that you are. So what position was Green Day in coming off of American Idiot? Were they more popular than they were in the 1990s?
I see, that's tough. I would venture to say yes, because they already had their popularity from the 90s. And, over the years, it was waning down. Dookie, obviously monumental album in the 90s, one of the biggest punk albums, more along the lines of like what would become pop punk. But either way, one of the biggest albums of the 90s. Over time, they kind of, started to fizzle out, with Warning being not well received at the time. Now people look back on it and they have a little bit different feelings on it. So when they made American Idiot, they were really going for something big there. They just said, we're just going to go for this. We're going to do it. And it worked out. They ended up having what most artists, most groups do not have, which is a huge resurgence in their career. Not only bringing older fans they may have fallen off back, but bringing in a whole new generation of fans. I know I myself found them from American Idiot. 2004, I heard the opening chords of that album. I was hooked. I went through their entire discography, purchased everything, the whole 9 yards. That's what got me into music as a whole. And I think that's the same case for a lot of people around my age at the time. I remember everyone had that album. So they were massive. They were doing huge shows. They did the Bullet in a Bible live album. Yeah. Just massive stadium shows, arenas, the whole 9 yards. So they were huge, even down to doing that song, The Saints Are Coming, with, icons like U2. So they were massive. So following that up, not an easy task. No, it was just kind of, where are they going to go from here? Are they going to keep this political thing going, which they very often get mislabeled, in my opinion, a political band. I think while they do have hints of politics in there, I don't think that's what they were going for or what they wanted to be the case. I think that it's less about politics and more about just the social climate and just things going on in the world as a whole. So I'll get into that later when we discuss more.
Mhm.
But I mean, they were in a tough place following up probably not only one of the biggest albums of the 2000s, one of the biggest and most monumental albums of all time. So, they really just had to get down in the studio and just hit it out of the park. And I think they succeeded that. Whether or not critically and, the fans agree, I think a lot of people would, but, critically didn't get as much acclaim as American Idiot.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. My second question for you is, going into 21st Century Breakdown, what sort of musical inspirations were they getting into? Because was it mainly pop punk, or because I know that they covered Bob Dylan's Like a Rolling Stone during the sessions, as far as I know.
They did. That is, if anyone has not heard it, it is a great cover of the song. It was actually released as a bonus track for, I have it right here, let me just double check it. It was actually one of the iTunes pre-order bonus tracks. Remember when those were a thing?
Oh yeah.
There was also a cover on there of That's All Right by Elvis. Not as good. It's very interesting. If you haven't heard it, definitely recommend checking it out. Funny story about that is they actually didn't remember recording that one. I remember listening to Billy give a story about how he was in a store and their version started playing, and he was confused and didn't remember recording it. But really, pop punk, I don't think has ever been a big influence on the band. I think that it really more goes back to, specifically for this album, those old 70s, 80s, even like some 60s classic rock acts here. And I think that really shines through on the more like operatic, like grand, epic songs. Like, you don't have your Jesus of Suburbia or your Homecoming on here, but even 21st Century Breakdown, multiple part song, has those just sweeping, like iconic parts. Same thing, American Eulogy, just the multiple parts of it. That's something that really doesn't exist in the pop punk world. If anything, the more punk aspects, I think, come from just their background in, like, the early 90s, like Gilman, and like late 80s, like Gilman, West Coast punk, that kind of stuff. But I think that doesn't really come through as much on this album as the more classic rock does. I mean, a lot of critics even compared it to old things like by The Who, which they actually did a cover of a quick one while he's away.
That's right. Yep.
Also an iTunes deluxe edition bonus track for this album. Probably my favorite Green Day cover. They did that song justice so well. Honestly, in my opinion, better than The Who did it. Like, that's maybe controversial opinion there, but I think that this album really shows that they wanted to lean into those more classic rock aspects and kind of go for that, not so much a concept album as American Idiot was, but more of just like a rock opera styled album. And I think they succeeded with that. I mean, they had the album split to 3 different parts. Story's not as cohesive as, American Idiot. It's more just loose threads throughout. I would say, yeah, mostly classic rock influences all over this. Some punk here and there. They did do one of the covers that's a bonus track, was Another State of Mind, originally by Social Distortion. That kind of gets thrown under the rug a lot. I really like that cover. It's pretty by the books. But really, that's honestly probably the most punk they get from this era.
All right. Awesome. My third question for you, my good man, is that what was the recording process like for them? How long were the sessions? Do you know how long the sessions were for the album?
So I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
What I do know is they did start writing early stages for this album. It was either on the road after, like during the winding down of the American Idiot touring, or directly after. So like 2001, late 2005, 2006 or so.
Okay.
Would have been when it would have started. I believe they didn't go into the studio to record until 2008. In between this time period, we did get the more fun Foxborough Hot Tubs album. So that was kind of like a avenue to get the more like fun garage rock style that the band wanted to get out. So I mean, there was other things coming out through this time, but it was about it was a 5 year period between albums here.
Wow.
I believe
And that
that's
was
the longest
as a
ever gone.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying that I think that's the longest to this day that they've ever gone without an album, not counting Foxborough Hot Tubs in there.
And for those of you who are unaware, Foxborough Hot Tubs is one of Billy Joe Armstrong's side band projects.
Yeah, that was actually the full band with a couple other guys. Great shows. I really bummed I didn't get a chance to be at the original ones, and they haven't done. They did a couple shows a few years back in other states that I wasn't able to get to, but they used to be like these crazy fun, like 21 plus only shows at like small bars and stuff. But very fun album. Highly recommend checking that out too.
Yeah, definitely. My fourth question for you, my man, is what is your favorite song off the album? I know this might be a bit of a loaded question, but just out of curiosity, I mean, because it is your favorite album of all time. So
yeah. So 3 songs. I go back and forth between 3.
okay.
The Static Age. I don't know what it is about that song. I don't think many people have that. Even in the top half of Green Day songs, it's a pretty by the books Green Day song. But there's just something about it. The lyrics, I feel like it's just such a relevant song even today. And then the other 2 picks I have, maybe more common, definitely more common than that one. 21st Century Breakdown, the title track, that whole intro to the album, it's amazing. Everything from it, the like self-introspective lyrics from Billy, and just the way it goes through seamlessly, the different parts of that song, it just comes off as epic. It's such a way to kick off the album. And then American Eulogy. That song, it gives Mike Dirnt his time to shine on vocals. It's great. Really the last time on a Green Day album, other than the one single line that he gets on Sex, Drugs, and Violence in Trey, that we get to see a Mike Dirnt driven section of a song. So that's something I wish we would see more. That song is incredible. And all 3 of these songs they hold up even today. Like, we're 12 years later almost, like almost 13 years later almost now.
It's crazy,
and,
yeah.
Yeah. And these songs, they're still relevant because the way they wrote them, they aren't political in terms of here's what's going on right now. They work in any given like situation of, unrest and just agitation and frustration, and it's perfect. They still hold up today, and I would definitely have to put those 3 at my top.
All right, so those are your top 3 songs off the album. Cool. My 5th question for you, my guy, is what were some of the themes on the album? Because you said once we said before that the album is broken up into 3 acts or 3 parts. I know you said there's some political stuff on the album, some certain lyrics. I mean, it came out in 2009. There was plenty of stuff going on between, let's say, like American Idiot and this album. What were some of the themes, would you say, on this album, and what are they?
So this album, it's not so much like American Idiot was, where it's a cohesive story going on. That's a pretty easy one to follow. It's some of the lyrics on American Idiot are pretty heavy-handed, like, hey, this is how we feel about this. This album, not so much. There's definitely some songs where that comes out, like East Jesus Nowhere. That's just like a song like completely anti-organized religion, and it works great. It's a great song. Live, that song was fantastic too. The way that they played into their stage show with that whole thing. Overall, that's the main theme of the album is just frustration with things that you see going on in the world. And then there's the whole, I don't know if I want to get into this now, but there's like the whole backing storyline of the Christian and Gloria stuff that plays in. So songs like Love, and little bit things like that here and there.
Yeah.
But really, to me, what it comes down for thematically on this album is like the most personal lyrics that I think Billy has ever written in terms of a full album.
Okay.
He's definitely gotten personal other times, and definitely there are some songs later in their career too that I think might be a little more personal.
Hmm.
But to me, this album was the one where I was like, wow, this is just him unloading like his own personal life onto these words, which, all their albums were. But something about this album doing it, it was just very different. It felt very personal. Uh, you could feel the frustration coming along, and the production on this, fantastic. Like everything about it worked great. But in terms of the theme, that's really it. I think just frustration and the way the world is going.
Yeah, I definitely see that now that you've pointed that out to me more and more. Um, no, question number 6. I noticed that there's some piano on this album. Now, being that Green Day was typically known as a hard driving, guitar driven band, as someone who has played the piano at one point, yours truly, what prompted Green Day to incorporate piano as well as other instruments into their work, being that they're so guitar driven for the most part?
So I think that really comes down to, like we talked about earlier, the influences on this album. Like when you're taking from like the classic rock influences, you know, I think at one point, if I'm not mistaken, I think Mike had compared this album like thematically and inspiration wise and songwriting wise to Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run.
Okay.
Uh, I could be wrong on that, but I believe I
Mhm.
remember that being the case. These old classic singer songwriters, they incorporated all different instruments into their work. And I think that's something that
Mhm.
Green Day really wanted to get into doing. They proved that they could make these kind of, I don't want to say crazy, but like, because they're not like crazy when you compare it to some other artists out there, like your progressive metal and like your power metal, things like that. But when they write like these big anthems and epics like Jesus of Suburbia and Homecoming, like they realize, wait, we can do this. Jesus of Suburbia, that's on
Yeah,
my phone's ringing. You may have lost off.
you're good. Keep
All right.
going.
All right. So yeah, as I was saying, they proved that they could do it on American Idiot. So I think they really just wanted to get down and dial that up on this album. Be like, hey, we showed we could do this. We're gonna do it again. And in my opinion, I think it paid off. It worked great. Something again, I wish they would do more now. Um,
Mhm.
we did get some on Father of All, some keys and like the background of some songs. Whether I wouldn't say it worked nearly as well on that album,
Yeah, I agree with
but I
that.
mean, I would love for them to bring that back. And they did kind of on this their newest single. Actually reminded me of something that we may have heard on a 21st Century Breakdown like album. So I think that really it's just them as they get older being more willing to show those old influences that they have.
All right. I just want to. You said something about something about how what Mike Dirnt said at one point. I do remember reading something like that too, where he did compare it to not only Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run, but I believe he also said Meatloaf's Bad Out of Hell or something like that. I think he might have said something like that too. I could be wrong, but I read something like that as well. That he was
That,
comparing it to other songs like that or
yeah,
albums like that.
yeah, and I mean it's a great comparison too. I mean, Meatloaf's "Bad Out of Hell" is one of the most classic albums ever written. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, like that kind of music or not, when you listen to that album, it's like these are just great, like perfectly written songs, pretty much all the way through of that album. And those songs, they're not short. Those songs, some 7+ minutes long, you know, and they're all great. And I think that that's something that Green Day really wanted to just really focus on and write great songs for this album, and not just great Green Day songs. When you listen to this album, these are all just take the band out of it, take like any kind of like I'm a fan of this band, so I have to like this album. Take all that out of the equation. These are just well written, like perfectly crafted songs.
Mhm.
One exception to me being Christian's Inferno. I think that song kind of sticks out like a sore thumb on the album. It's a good song. but I think it definitely fits more on their network side project. And I have a feeling it was written originally for that and carried over. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Gotcha. I definitely I see where you're coming from, but the average person may be like, what are you talking about? um
Yeah.
Now, being that it is coming off American Idiot and that this is their second quote unquote rock opera, I heard there's a story focused on main two characters. Is that you said it's not entirely about the Christian? I'm sorry, Christian
Christian
and Gloria. Yeah, like it's not a. He said it's not because I always thought when I listened to it personally, it's one of those albums like you have to listen to it from start to finish, and you listen to it and it tells us somewhat of a narrative. But I could tell it was looser than American Idiot. What could you tell me about like that thread, if you will?
Yeah, so I mean that thread, I think what they use those characters mainly for, rather than telling like a story, like American Idiot was such a story, like beginning to end, that you listen to it and you're like, okay, I know what's going on. To the point where they even made, during the 21st Century Breakdown era, they made the American Idiot Broadway musical.
Right.
21st Century Breakdown, you wouldn't be able to do that with, to the extent that the American Idiot musical actually used songs from 21st Century Breakdown in it, in addition to the normal American Idiot songs, like Before the Lobotomy was in there, 21 Guns was in there. I believe Last of the American Girls was in there as well.
Okay.
And really the songs, this album, I don't know if they really needed this thread for this album to work. Because when you listen through it, I agree with what you said. This album is definitely best listened to beginning to end. And you definitely feel as though there's like a conclusion, like a definitive conclusion to the album.
Yeah.
But there's no, at least in my opinion, when I listen to it, there's no real story with the characters. They definitely use the characters to tie certain things together. Like, I mean, you have the both Viva La Glorias in there where they mention the characters throughout the album.
Yeah.
But I think they're more just to fit the theme of just, it's supposed to be like this couple that's, in love, dealing and also dealing with the frustrations of the world around them, specifically when they wrote this in the post Bush, like early Obama times. And given everything that's happened since then, this album still feels super relevant thematically. And I just question, that's one that I love the storyline, if you will, with that. I don't think they really needed it. I think that if they just left it as the songs, I think that some of the songs definitely needed it because people of Gloria, they're just mentioning the characters by name. I don't think it necessarily needed that storyline to be like a focus. Like, look, they're writing another rock opera. I think that's where that came from mostly. Was they were trying to lean heavily into, well, American Idiot was a rock opera. We got to do it again. And they did it in what I think is a more effective way than American Idiot. That might be a little controversial.
No, I understand.
But American Idiot, I feel like, let's take Spotify, for example. I hate what Spotify did with American Idiot. I don't know if iTunes did this as well, or Apple Music. I don't use that. But Spotify lumps songs together on American Idiot, like Holiday and Boulevard Broken Dreams.
Yeah.
Why they do this, I don't know. They do fade into each other, but they're not. It's not like Jesus of Suburbia. It's not one song. They're two very different songs. This album, you couldn't do that with any of these songs. It just wouldn't work. This album has more playability in terms of if you want to throw Green Day songs on shuffle. I think that these songs they stand alone better than a lot of American Idiot does. So, like, for example, if I put on shuffle on Green Day on Spotify, and let's say Last Night on Earth comes on, probably not going to skip it. Love that song. But now if Are We the Waiting comes on for American Idiot, probably going to be more inclined to skip that song.
Yeah.
That song, it works so well in the context of the album and in the play. In terms of storytelling, it works fantastically. But when you like break it down, that song comes on. How often are people going to listen to "Are We the Waiting" on its own without Saint Jimmy directly after it? You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
this album, I feel like doesn't have that. Like, I feel like the theme, it's there, and you can definitely tell when listening front to back, like they were going for this with these characters. I see the loose thread here, but it's not to the point of I need to listen to this album like this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just as a follow up to that, I mean, you brought up two really good examples of like, sorry, one really good example of how like, not two, sorry, with Holiday into Boulevard of Broken Dreams on Spotify, and how those two are like are attached in the sense,
Yep.
except on their greatest hits, package on
Yep.
that album. But if you listen to Are We the Waiting into St. Jimmy, those two, like I feel like a lot of people are just used to hearing those songs together in a sense. Whereas on this one, this one they did that. They didn't do that with like all these individual songs. But I will say this: I have listened to this several times from start to finish. One thing I just want to ask you is that some of the songs fade into each other. Like as one song ends, there's like another transitional sound into it. I thought that
Last
was
of the
brilliant.
American Girls into Murder City is one of the best examples of that. Uh,
Yeah,
Same thing. Last Night on Earth into East Jesus Nowhere. The transitions
yeah,
are fantastic on this album. I think the only one that you could do what they did with American Idiot on would be Last of the American Girls into Murder City. Because when Murder City starts, from a shuffle perspective, it does sound weird. I
a little
will
bit. Yeah.
I will hand it to that one because like the beeping that's going on at the end of Last of the American Girls into Murder City,
Mm-hmm.
it it flows right into each other there. But as a whole, yeah, I think that this like the fades aren't as extreme as they are. And even on American Idiot, I wouldn't say they're extreme fades. I think it's just a weird choice on the record label or Spotify, whoever chose to do that.
Yeah, I
I think it's
agree.
just a weird choice on their part.
Yeah, because I mentioned their greatest hits when their greatest hits came out in what 2017 or 2018, I forget what it was.
I
But
guess probably like 2017 or so.
yeah, I remember that, and that they had like Holiday was its own track,
Yep.
and Boulevard of Broken Dreams was its own track, and um, yeah, I mean, and that proved to be successful. I mean, if you look at Spotify numbers, like you pointed out, their Spotify numbers for those individual tracks are so much higher compared
Yep.
to the two put together. Which I don't mind the two put together. Like Holiday and the Boulevard of Broken Dreams is pretty cool to me,
Oh, it's
but
iconic.
yeah, but them separate at the same time, I like that they're separate though on that in particular greatest hits album, which I like that too. So,
Yeah,
um,
like take it like this. I don't know about you.
mhm.
I am personally so played out on Boulevard of Broken Dreams.
Yeah, no,
I
completely hear you on that.
I have heard that song everywhere since like fourth grade. Don't get me wrong, it's a great song. It's overplayed for a reason.
Mhm.
But if I never heard that song again, I'd be okay. Like pretty almost every time it comes on, I skip it. It's
Mm,
great live. I love seeing it live.
yeah.
You can tell like the passion he has behind it. But man, I am so played out on that song. So sometimes I just want to hear Holiday.
I don't blame you.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, there's just a another question there about the fade in and fade out of the album. And one more question, then I got a couple other follow ups with it if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Um, so how to you being a listener of this album, you saw them on the tour as well. How does this album hold up to you almost a decade after it's been released? How does it hold up to you as a listener?
As a listener, I think this album held up better than most albums from this time period.
Mhm.
I would say, you know, just based on when this album came out in my life, this is where most of the albums that really stuck with me through the years came from this time period, the late mid to late 2000s, early 2010s. You know, and this one holds up, I think, significantly better than most. The production on this, them working with Butch Vig, is probably the best team up they could have ever had. And for those that might not know, Butch Vig also worked on like Nirvana's Nevermind and plenty of other massive albums. They've never worked with him again after this. I don't know why. I don't know if they've ever given a reason why, if anyone's ever asked them. But his production made this album so good. And it just holds up. Even the production quality on it 13 years later, with everything being even more digital now, it still sounds fresh. Every time I hear it, I just think if you showed me this song and said this came out 12, 13 years ago, I'd be like, wow, that's surprising. Whereas let's take a couple of years before this, I want to say it was 2006. Like, let's take My Chemical Romance's The Black Parade, another big epic concept album. Again, amazing album, incredible album, huge album in my childhood. When I go back and listen to some of those songs, they feel more dated. I don't know off the top of my head who produced that album. I don't know anything like that. But it just sounds so, like mid 2000s. This album sounds fresh to this day. And that's something that a lot of people can't do. And I got to hand it to him just on that alone. But in terms of everything else holding up, this is still in my mind. And it could just be, nostalgia. This is still, to me, what Green Day is to this day. Like, let's look at their live shows. I think this is where they took off in terms of their live sets. I mean, this tour saw them breaking out different set lists just about every night. That's something that probably like 95% of bands don't do. Most bands just pick, this is our set list. We're playing it the entirety of the tour. We might change it up once or twice. They were playing a full arena tour, multiple legs in multiple different countries. America, I saw them here on 2 different legs, and it was a completely different set list each time. In the span of, 1 year, one summer was this, one summer was a completely different set list. Same album, same tour, but they had a full backdrop, things going on, like a whole stage show type thing.
Yeah.
And they still managed to change it up. And that's something that I think they were playing, occasionally some nights they would play 30 songs. Really, they were
playing. A long time.
They were playing close to 3 hours on this tour. And that's something their long sets did continue, but really they have kind of gone down in terms of spontaneity. Let's take Hell Omega, for example. Yeah. Every single night was the same set list, and it was great. It was amazing to see them in a big stadium. But every night, the same set list. So if someone had spoiled it for you, you knew you were getting, but you pretty much knew you were getting anyway. It was only an hour and a half set list. They were going to play the hits. It's a big stadium tour. That's fine. But really, this era of Green Day, 21st Century Breakdown, is stuck in my head as this is peak Green Day. This is where I want them to be, but I'll take anything they want to give me. So, I mean, really, when I hear this album, I think to this day, like, wow, that was a masterpiece of it, like, of an album, or just when I hear a song, masterpiece of a song.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more on that. I mean, I'm a little younger than you, but like, I definitely understand where you're coming from. Like how it does hold up quite a bit. I mean, the production, you mentioned Butch Vig. Butch Vig is known for Nirvana's Nevermind. I mean, at least in my book, but he's also known for this. And I'm surprised as well why Green Day hasn't chosen him to do any more albums with him. I mean, you could tell the production was so different from American Idiot and Uno Dos Tres and this album just in the time span of like what, 10, 12, 13 years.
Yeah. I mean, after this album, after Butch, they went, they did the trilogy, and that production was weird. The songwriting was there. The songwriting was good, but the production was oddly clean. Like they tried to go back to their old like Dookie Kerplunk roots a little bit,
Yeah.
but the production was like clean and weird. And then Revolution Radio, amazing. That's probably honestly my favorite thing they've done since 21st Century Breakdown.
Yeah.
It had a lot of those epic, like back we're talking about like the Who influence. Somewhere Now feels like a Who song. You know, Forever Now, another great epic by them. And they, if I remember correctly, they completely self-produced that one.
Okay.
And that had some weird production choices, like just volume levels being all over the place. Like if you put on the song Too Dumb to Die, you can hardly hear the intro, and then it just blows out your speakers. So the idea of them, and then Father of All, that's a whole nother can of worms. They went Butch Walker for that one, and good producer, just not what I want from this type of album. Like not what I want from a Green Day album. A lot of overproduction and hand claps and stuff, and very odd. So I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't go with Butch Vig again. I would love it. I think it might have something to do with how dark of a time Billy was in writing this album.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And I think that might have something to do with why we don't hear more of these songs live. You know, this was the tour really where he was getting, you know, high and really drunk before every show. This is where a lot of his substance abuse problems really came in and messed everything up. And then it carried over to the trilogy, which, you know, we all know the iHeart media meltdown moment and his rehab, and it kind of messed up the, you know, the promotion of the trilogy. But really that all stemmed from the writing being stressful of this album and everything that came along with it. And he you know, he was even saying he'd be messed up before just about every show on this tour. So I mean, that might be that might be part of the reason we've seen completely different, well, not completely different, but I mean like stagnant shows with predictable set lists since then.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, he might not want to revisit. I know like the song Restless Heart Syndrome, for example. That's one that I remember reading him saying was deeply personal to him. He doesn't really play it live. He doesn't really have a desire to. And just recently, I was reading something about him saying that 21st Century Breakdown is probably his favorite Green Day album.
Not bad.
But I don't think we'll ever get to see many of the songs live outside of Know Your Enemy and 21 Guns.
Yeah. I mean, that's one last thing I was going to ask you was, I mean, Hella Mega Tour. I mean, that was my first exposure to them, seeing them live. So I mean, I can't really judge myself on like a 3-hour show of theirs, you know, whatever, like you have. But I will say that they did play Know Your Enemy, and they played, and I've looked at their set list from previous tours like Revolution Radio and other stuff like that, and even the trilogy, they played Know Your Enemy a lot, and 21 Guns is the other one they play acoustically. But another thing is why, and I think I asked you this before we even decided to do this. Why do they cut the last verse off? Do we have any idea why they do that live?
I don't know. I've always wondered why, because they used to play the full song back during the actual 21st Century Breakdown tour, which made sense. And then they started cutting it down.
Okay.
On this tour, on the Hella Mega, they played more of it. I don't know if they played the full song, but they played more than they usually did.
Okay.
I don't know what the decision factor on that was, but it's always bothered me.
I mean, yeah, because one thing I know is just someone who's listened to the song numerous times and all this stuff. They played 21 Guns. They cut it off after the guitar solo before the last verse and the chorus, though before that last little bit, the last minute of the song. Why would they? And then they went right into Minority. I mean, I get it, but like I don't get it.
I think it comes down to them using it as a bit of a transition song live. I'm trying to remember when I saw them, because I saw them twice on the 21st Century Breakdown tour. Saw them once on the Trilogy tour. I don't remember much about that show, to be honest, other than they did play quite a bit of Trilogy songs, which was great. but the crowd was noticeably not into it,
Mm.
which kind of brought the whole energy level down. Like I remember they played X Kid, which is one of my favorite Green Day songs, but the
Yeah.
crowd was just really not into it, and like the whole energy like came down. It was really weird. That was also the only show where they did not end with Good Riddance, and they didn't play it at all. They played Brutal Love, which one of my favorite Green Day songs, but weird choice. So, more weird choices. But I'm trying to remember on that night, I saw them 3 times on the Revolution Radio tour, but I can't remember what they played after 21 Guns. I don't remember. They may have just been using it as a transition song acoustically for that.
Yeah. I know there is video of it online at one point or another on the last US leg part of it. They were doing an encore of acoustic 21 Guns into Good Riddance Time of Your Life.
Yeah, that's what they were doing. Yeah.
Okay.
They would do the acoustic 21 Guns. This is the first time in years. I don't remember if it was the 21st Century Breakdown tour or the Trilogy tour, but this tour, Hell Omega, was the first time in years that they'd actually played 21 Guns with the full band. They had actually been playing it acoustically for years.
I read somewhere that when they opened up the Hell Omega tour in Texas, I believe, they actually said that this version of 21 Guns was the first time it was used since 2010.
Yeah,
of that version.
Right. Yeah, that sounds about right. 21st Century Breakdown tour. Because after that, they did acoustics. What?
Yeah, because I guess they were trying to go for like the hits, and of course they were. But I mean but that like live rendition of it was a blessing, true. Because I mean, I was a lot young. I mean, I was like 11 years old in 2009, so I don't really remember a lot of it. But
yeah,
so that's me. Overall, like just overall impressions. I mean, personally, for me personally, I do love the album quite a bit. It's definitely up there for me as well. A phenomenal work that Green Day did. I mean, your overall like last impressions of it. What do you got?
Last impressions is Green Day. If you ever hear this, do this again. I'll take whatever they want to throw at us at this point. There hasn't been a single thing they've done that I haven't liked. Full disclosure on that. Even some songs that people hate, I've loved. I think I've had maybe one song that I was like, I don't know about that. But this album is so good. And this whole era of the band, down to everything, the songwriting, the aesthetics during this era, like they're even down to their outfits were so good. The stage show was so cool. Everything about it, the artwork, I don't know what it was about it, but everything, whoever was doing the art for them at this point, hit the nail on the head. Not just the album artwork, the liner notes, the t-shirts from this time, everything about it was so good and so iconic that I always find myself wishing for this to come back. And I know the era's over. It's been over a decade now, so wishful thinking. But this album is so iconic, and they won a Grammy for this.
Yeah, won Best Rock Album of the Year.
Best rock album, I think, probably their last Grammy. I could be wrong. Might have gotten something after this, but I can't think of what they would have. Also nominated for plenty of other awards. It's everything about it was such a great time to be a Green Day fan. I remember conveniently, I was homesick from school and Know Your Enemy dropped. I had no idea about it, so it's pretty much out of nowhere to me. And I remember thinking, wow, I don't really like this song. And I was a little disappointed. But then I got the album when it came out. The day it came out, I bought the album and listened to it for just weeks. And the first listen through the album, I was like, wow, I was wrong about this album. I was wrong to be concerned. Because let's be honest, a lot of people have probably only heard Know Your Enemy and 21 Guns from this album.
Yep.
Maybe East Jesus Nowhere. That was like the third single, but never really went anywhere. And maybe 21st Century Breakdown and Last of the American Girls were also minor singles. But really, Know Your Enemy is what people know. And that song, now I like it. At the time, when it first came out, I didn't like it. Took me a while to warm up to it. It's super repetitive. I understand why people wouldn't like it. It was a terrible choice for a lead single from this album. But if that's all you've heard from this album, I encourage you to go back, listen to this whole thing, and just, there's no way you could tell me afterwards that it's not a work of art. Like, it's so masterfully crafted that I haven't heard an album like it since. Like, then no album since this has like grasped me and been like, this is a work of art, like this is a masterpiece. Hopefully one day one will, from any band, but still waiting.
I don't blame you there. I hope that all other people are listening and watching and understanding that, you know, this is definitely not many albums come out like this not many albums come out like this that often. I mean, we're lucky you even got this. So
I mean, when I look at it, albums like this are like once a decade, and you know, now we now live in a time that's, the album takes a backseat. Most artists nowadays are just doing singles and EP here or there, and then some of them are just like, oh, here's an album. It's a compilation of all the singles I put out recently. So what's rare about Green Day and this album is this was their really third massive album in America. Like Dookie, 94, huge album. American Idiot, 2004, massive album. That alone, having a massive album in two separate decades, is so rare for a band to do.
Yep.
So for them then to follow up American Idiot with another iconic album, it's near impossible. It's something that so few bands can do and stay relevant. Even to this day, you go to a Green Day concert, you see how relevant they still are. Even if you don't hear people on the streets talking about them, you go to a Green Day concert, you'll see people of all ages there, from people in like their 60s to little kids like 5 years old, just sitting there singing every word. Their music is timeless. And I think this album was really, I don't want to say the last great Green Day album, because they're all great, and Revolution Radio was fantastic. But I think this was the last like mainstream Green Day album that really brought the most new fans in.
I tend to agree with that. I thank you, by the way, so much for coming on. I know I've wanted to do this. I want to do this for a while with you. It was like and if you want to come back anytime, we could definitely do like a Dookie or American or anything else you wanted to. If you have any ideas, let me know. I'm more than happy to do this with you if you want to do it. So
yeah, absolutely.
So, but that is going to do it for us. Thank you to my good man Kyle, Green Day fanatic over here. He is one of a kind, and I want to thank him so much for coming on and even sharing his light for his favorite album of all time. Thank you so much for watching and listening. You guys are outstanding, and we'll see you guys next time. So, see you later.